High-res key 1 and high-res key 2. We're creating an SD key, and we want to assign key 1, so press SD key 1. There are 6 areas under SD key 1. Let's start with Type. You will see we have 3 options: Chroma, Luma, and PIP. A chroma key is the type we talked about earlier, where a specific color, like a green screen or blue screen, is replaced with a different image. A Luma key is similar, but it uses black and white values to choose which part to replace. The third choice, PIP, stands for Picture-in-Picture. This is what we want to do with the PowerPoint. The next button, Source, allows you to adjust the setup you did earlier. If you wanted to adjust that choice, you could do it from this menu as well as the bus row. Next is the Adjust button. Here we could adjust the opacity if we desired. Notice that the left-hand digipot has been assigned the opacity adjustment. You can twist the digipot to adjust the opacity of the picture-in-picture. To return the opacity to its default setting of 100%, just press down on the digipot like this. Let's jump to the section called Transform. Press Enable to allow changes to the size, rotation, and position. You'll see a group of adjustment panels appear. Let's start by decreasing the overall size of the picture-in-picture. Press the 2D size panel and you'll see that the digipots have been assigned to 2D size X, 2D size Y, and 2D size All. We want to shrink it in all 3, so we can adjust the 2D size All digipot. We will set it to 0.40. You can also change the size by twisting the joystick. Now we need to move it over the presenter's shoulder. We can do this by choosing the 3D position panel. Using the X and Y position digipots, we can move the picture-in-picture to the correct location. The joystick will also allow you to visually adjust the location. The next button is Crop Border. This will allow you to crop the image as well as adding a border with any color you wish. Let's add a red border to the edge. First, press Enable to enable cropping and border creation. Let's crop the edges off the PowerPoint. Do this by pressing the Crop All panel. You will notice that one digipot has been assigned to crop all edges and the other is set up for softness. Let's crop in by 10%. Remember, to restore the default settings, just press the digipot. Now to create our red border. We'll start by choosing the width of the border. Press Border All. Using the digipots, let's create a 2% border with a softness of 8%. Now let's add a color. Choose the Border Color panel. Use your saturation and hue digipots to select a red border. There we go. Now we have a PowerPoint image over the presenter's shoulder with a red border. The principles we used, selecting the submenus and then making fine adjustments with the digipots, are used in almost everything you need to do with the Indigo mixer. Adding the bug will be a very similar procedure, but you will choose a still image from the source menu. Select Luma key as its type. You can use the default settings or adjust the opacity so that it has that semi-transparent look that you see on TV. Once you set up these keys, they will remain in the mixer memory until you change them. If you would like to use more than 2 high-res keys and 2 SD keys in your program, you can save many different key setups using EMEM presets. We'll discuss EMEM in more depth a little bit later on. Keys are typically set up in advance of your event. Don't forget that because you use Next Transition to preview the final result. If you do a transition, the key will mix into your program output. Unless you want them, deselect the key buttons until you're ready to include them in your program. Those are the basics of the keyer. There are plenty of other applications that you can use your keyer for, including live green screen shots. The principles are the same. By using the submenus to navigate to different options and then using the digipots or joystick to dial in the specifics, you can quickly master all the functions of the keyer. Let's continue on by looking at transitions. The Indigo AV Mixer has a large library of various transitions, wipes, and special effects. We're going to look at them in our next section. Having interesting and appropriate transitions in your live event can really increase the impact of the material, as well as giving the event a smooth, professional look. For that reason, the Indigo AV Mixer comes equipped with a huge selection of transitions and effects. We'll go through a few of them so we can get the basics of how to apply transitions to any situation. Let's start with the basics. We will assume the following setup for now. A camera feed is coming in on SD input 1, and a turbo digital disc recorder is coming in on SD input 2. We will choose SD input 1 in the program row, and SD input 2 on the preview row. Remember, this means that when we transition, input 2 will switch to the program row, and input 1 will move to the preview row. Let's quickly review the physical buttons that pertain to transitions. The first button is Cut. This will create a hard cut between the two sources. FTB will create a fade to black. Auto will transition between the two sources using the transition and duration that you specify in the submenus. The lever arm will allow you to manually control the length of the transition. Also, remember that to do any transitions other than dissolves, you must highlight the FX button, which engages the DVE or digital video effects. Since we'll be using digital effects, we will highlight the FX button right now. Let's go into the transition menu, which we choose from the side tabs. You'll notice that we have 3 tabs along the top: SD effects, high-res effects, and duration. We're working with SD sources, so we will choose SD effects. This gives us 5 buttons along the top to choose from: SD background, SD key 1 in, SD key 1 out, and then SD key 2 in and out. This means that for your key layers, you can have one transition set for when it comes in and another for when it goes out. But for now, let's look at the SD background button. You'll see that we get 8 buttons to choose from. The best way to learn these transitions is to kind of play around with them. It's fun, and it'll help you understand the differences between them all. Indigo has a bunch of interesting preset transition patterns that you can choose from or modify to suit your own production look. We don't have time to look at each transition individually, so we will just pick 2 and try them for demonstration purposes. Let's say we want to transition from our camera to the turbo footage with a ripple effect, maybe to indicate someone remembering something. Go to the 3D button and choose Ripple. Now, if we move the lever arm from bottom to top, it ripples from the camera to the turbo footage. Easy. And we can control the length of the effect by how quickly we move the handle. Now let's try pressing Auto. This will transition back from the turbo to the camera at the default speed. Pretty nice. But let's change that duration so it takes 3 times as long. Go up to the Duration tab and choose the SD panel. Now find the digipod assigned to the SD background. Change the value from 1 second to 3 seconds. Now press the Auto button again. See? This time it took 3 seconds to transition. Not too hard. You can quickly become acquainted with all the transitions by trying out different settings for each one and trying to use both the lever arm and the Auto button. A few things to remember. You have 2 digital video effects available at any one time. So if you want to transition both keys in the background at the same time, only the keys will have the effects applied to them. The background will default to a standard dissolve. Also, all of these effects, and even a series of effects in a row, can be stored in your EMEM presets. We'll talk about EMEM later on. It's a great tool to save preset effects or sequences of effects. Most of the transitions have various parameters that you can adjust to your liking. Indigo remembers the adjustments you have made to a particular transition until you change them again. These adjustments, however, are not saved in EMEM presets, so if you want to return to a previous look, you will need to manually readjust it. You can also color correct any input coming into Indigo with a few simple steps. First, go to the Correction Mattes tab along the left-hand side. Choose the Color Correction tab. Then choose your input and press Enable to bring up color correction options. You can now change the color balance, the white balance, the contrast, and the gamma to really fine-tune the appearance of your presentation. As usual, the fine adjustments are made using the digipods. So now you have all the basics that you need to create some really cool and fun transitions for your live event. You can create the same kinds of effects that you would normally make in editing, but in real time. It's a fantastic tool for adding a lot of diversity and excitement to your presentation. Take some time and play with the different transitions. I think you'll find just the right ones for your content. Let's move on now and talk about how to create and import still images for your event. Let's take a couple minutes to talk about still images in your presentation. You can add a lot of visual flair and impact to your event by using still images. The Indigo AV Mixer has a great interface for importing, capturing, and using your still images to the greatest effect. There are two ways to bring still images into your Indigo system so that you can use them in your presentation. The first is to load them from an external device, and the second is to create a freeze frame or frame store. We'll start by talking about loading the still images from an external source. For this example, we have placed several JPEG images on this USB flash drive. The Indigo can read either JPEG or PNG files, but this time we just have JPEGs. The JPEGs are saved at the resolution of my output. Plug your USB flash drive into one of the USB ports located above the joystick. Now go to the Still Store tab along the side of the touchscreen. You will see that along the top you have two tabs, one for SD stills and one for high-res stills. For this example, we are using SD images. You can see by this icon that we have no still images loaded. So choose the first open space in O1 SD still and choose Load from the bottom of the page. Now you will see a list of any devices attached to the Indigo USB. Right now, we just have our flash drive. Choose the flash drive and you will see a list of any images that are on the flash drive. We will choose the image called Logo and press the Load button. Now you can see a thumbnail of the image you chose in the still storage. You can use these stills now in the same way you would use a video feed. We will use this still as the source for a Luma key. By default, these images are stored in buttons 13 and up. Remember, you can choose numbers above 10 by holding down Shift, so we can assign the logo to key 1 on the bus row by holding down Shift and pressing 3. We can also assign stills to different buttons if we want, but we'll go over how to do that in a later section. Note that if you use the touch screen to set up your key, the name of the still now appears as the name of a source that you can select for your key. The other way to get a still image into Indigo is to capture a freeze frame from the current program row. This is easily done in one of two ways. Simply press the FS button here, or press the freeze button in the still submenu. The freeze frame will be stored as an image in the submenu. Still stores are part of Indigo's volatile memory. Unless you save them to a USB drive as part of your shutdown procedure, they will be lost. You can save one or two stills from the Stills submenu or use the Load Save menu to save the entire mixer configuration, including all the stills. Still images can be a very important part of your production. By pre-assembling graphics, slides, composited logos, or key sources, you can increase the scope of your production to make it seem like it's being operated by an entire team of technicians. But in reality, it's just you. Let's move on to the auxiliary, or aux bus. We've already touched briefly on the idea of sending video signals out to auxiliary channels. We're going to go over it in more depth and try it in an actual example just to make sure that you have no problems with this important part of your production. For our example, let's assume the following setup. A scaled-down PowerPoint presentation is coming in on SD input 9, and a previously recorded video clip is coming in on SD input 3. Our presenter, who will be on stage, needs to be able to see the PowerPoint while she's speaking, and I need to be able to see the video clip. Make sure that the video clip is cued to the right place before you mix it into your program. So what we need to do is to send the signals out to secondary monitors using the auxiliary bus. One of the monitors is on stage, the other monitor is right here. First, we must assign sources to the aux outputs. We do that by pressing the aux 1 button and then choosing input 9 in the auxiliary bus. Now, the PowerPoint presentation that is coming in on input 9 is going out to aux channel 1, our onstage monitor. All of the sources for aux outputs are single rather than mixed sources. Selecting input 3 as the source for aux2 sends the video from the tape machine to the monitor here on my desk. The sources assigned to these auxes can be changed at any time by making a new selection on the bus. Note that the change is a simple cut and doesn't have effect options. Now all we have to do is run a connection between the aux1 and aux2 outputs on the back of Indigo to the appropriate monitors. Remember, composite outputs are on the top row and SDI outputs are on the bottom. Now our speaker on stage can refer to her presentation at any time, and I can be confident that the clip she wants is ready to play whenever she introduces it. It's really a pretty simple procedure once you get the basics down, and it's a very useful tool, allowing you to route any particular input to a secondary monitor for viewing. Let's move on to something that can be a huge asset to your production: effects memory, or EMEM. One of the really nice features of this Indigo mixer is the ability to store effects or a series of device states that you want to be able to recall with just one touch. We're going to use a couple different examples to show you some of what the EMEM feature can do. As with most of the things we've talked about, you can go much further into this feature by practicing with your Indigo mixer and reading more in the manual. Let's start by taking a look at how the EMEM feature actually works. Begin by pressing the EMEM tab along the side. You'll see that along the top there are numbered buttons. These correspond to which EMEM registers you're looking at. As you can see, you can save up to 160 different effects or combinations of effects. Below that, you will see 20 buttons. Each of these buttons represents a currently empty EMEM register. At the bottom is a series of mixer states that can be saved to an EMEM register. Everything from audio fader positions to transitions to keys to aux outputs and more. In order to save a state to EMEM, you start by choosing the register you want to save it in. Let's choose register 0. We can choose it either on the touch screen or by pressing the 0 button in the EMEM section of the physical buttons. Then we choose which elements we want to save to the EMEM. For this example, let's just choose an easy one: audio. So toggle off everything but audio. Then adjust your faders to the configuration you want, like this. Now we will save the current state to EMEM. Do this by pressing the Learn button. Now the EMEM is in learning mode, and whenever you press Enter, it will save that state to EMEM. So press Enter to save the current state. Now press Learn again to exit the learning mode. You will see that the Learn button stops blinking and space 0 now is green, meaning that there is data stored in register 0. Let's rename this EMEM so we can remember it later. Press Protect to disable the protection lock on EMEM 0. Now press Rename and give it a new name. Let's call it Audio 1. Now move all your audio faders to a different position so that we can see how the EMEM works. To recall the state we saved to EMEM, just press the 0 button and then press Enter. You will see the audio faders return to the state they were in when we saved the EMEM. You could select this EMEM from the touch screen as well, and for registers higher than 19, you will need to access them from there. This is exactly how it works for anything that you save into EMEM. When you press the button again and hit Enter, it will recall that state instantly. Let's try a more complicated EMEM setup. What we want to do is save a series of states in a row. So let's say that the effect we are looking for is for a picture-in-picture key to move from one side to the other and then down to the bottom. For this example, we're going to assume that we have a camera signal coming in on SD input 1 and this still image of a graph called graph JPEG stored in the still store and assigned to button 4. We'll go over how to reassign sources to different buttons in a later chapter. First, let's create our picture-in-picture. Choose the Keyer tab, choose SD Key 1, and then choose PIP under Type. Go to Source and choose the graph image. Make sure that you have enabled Key 1 on your control panel. We want to set this up in advance on the program output because that is where you want to see the effect when you recall it later. Now let's choose the size and position. Under Transform, choose 2D size and adjust the size using the Digipot for Size All. Then select the 3D position panel. You can either use the digipots to adjust the position or use the joystick, which you'll notice is highlighted in blue. Place the picture-in-picture where you want it. This will be the first in a series of states you will store in eMem. Choose the eMem tab from the side. We can see that all the eMem registers are available, so let's go with number 5, just because. Press 5, then Learn. You are now in learning mode. Press Enter to save a state. Now, with Learn still active, let's move the picture-in-picture across the screen. Go to the Keyer tab and back to the 3D Position panel. Use your joystick to move the picture-in-picture to a new part of the screen. Now, press Enter again. Let's repeat that one more time. Use the joystick to move the picture-in-picture again, then press Enter one more time. Now press Learn to exit the learning mode. So what you've done is create 3 keyframes, basically 3 positions for your picture-in-picture. Indigo will take those 3 positions and then interpolate the positions in between to create a smooth movement. Now press 5 and then Enter. The picture-in-picture will move around the screen to the different positions we defined for it during the learning mode. This is just the beginning. You can include all the size, motion, and position parameters in your eMem. If you would like to change the duration between keyframes, you can do that from the eMem menu. As you are in the learning mode, the left-hand digipot controls the amount of time between keyframes. This is a feature worth practicing to get the full range of options. Something you should note is that if you save all your states to the eMem, it will bring back everything the way it was when you saved it, including audio parameters, video source selection, key setups, etc. So if there is a part of the current setup that you don't want to change when you recall the eMem, make sure it is deselected before you enter learning mode. Using pre-programmed effects or a series of effects is also a great way to get less experienced users going on the system. More advanced users can create eMem settings beforehand that the new user can load with the system configuration from USB and use at the touch of a button. Remember that eMems are stored in volatile memory. Unless you save them to USB as part of